All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's virtual plant clinic. Glad to have everybody back. David's going to be covering fall foliage today, which is a good seasonal topic. Just a couple of notes we're going to go over while we wait for people to get logged in. For those of you who are new to this program, this is a Zoom webinar, so we can't actually speak to you during the class. David's got some areas that are good stopping points where he can take questions during the class. So if you type your questions into that Q&A box on your Zoom menu, I'll be reading those to David when he's ready to start taking questions. And we should have plenty of time for Q&A today. I am recording this, and we're also going to be streaming live on Facebook, which I'm going to go ahead and hit go live on right now. So you'll be able to find this on Facebook following the class, or of course on YouTube. And I believe that about covers all of my notes for everybody. So David, I'm going to let you go ahead and dive in as always. Thank you for being here with us.
Okay, excellent. Well, it's great to be here, and what a beautiful fall we've been having. I kind of say this is the way I remember fall. This is the way it back in my sort of childhood days, September, cool and moist, and we got that rain coming in from the hurricane, and here we are now, halfway through fall, and we're, going into peak color as far as leaf color goes. So again, the cooler temperatures, the moisture we've had, I think this is just one of the most beautiful falls I have seen probably in decades, because it seems like the last few years, really, we had very dry, hot weather in September, stayed warm in October, and we weren't getting fall color showing up till well into November. So it's just coincidental that we kind of set up to do this topic today, focusing really on fall foliage color, because the last time we were here about a month ago, we talked about fall flower color. So again, thank you for being here. And I've just got it's kind of a random assortment of different plants that I wanted to talk about to really think about and enhance as far as fall foliage color goes in your garden. As Sal mentioned, I've built in 2 or 3 different places. We'll take some phone calls, questions, in between. So by all means, any ideas that you want to share, any questions you want to ask, join in. I really do like to make this more conversational and less of a lecture. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Just to kick off with a couple of thoughts or ideas regarding fall foliage color. So kind of odd that I might start with something like azaleas, but I kind of had this idea where I wanted to talk about evergreens a little bit, because nobody ever considers fall foliage color when we're discussing evergreens. It's sometimes kind of a little of an oxymoron when we're using a term like evergreen and talking about fall foliage color. But this is an image, a picture I took last year, a little bit later in the season, but it's with one of my colleagues here. A lot of you guys know Terry Hirschberger. He was the one that kind of spotted this, inspired us. And we went out there and we were just looking at our collection of azaleas out in the nursery, and what an amazing array of leaf color we have within there. And so, yes, most azaleas are evergreen, meaning that they do hold some foliage throughout the year, but that leaf color can vary quite dramatically, and some of them will shed a good percentage of their leaves. So you can almost see like the bright yellow in the center. Some varieties will start, just yellow out, and those yellow out, and then those will shed their leaves. The others, like the back right corner, I think is giving almost a bright red, I believe is Stewartsonii. It's already starting to show up with leaf color in there now. And this just kind of gives you an idea it's there. Now, I've never heard of anybody that actually goes out and selects azaleas for their fall leaf color. But I'm going to say I've been an exception that year. Rule ones that I have chosen for my own garden is I'm very much aware of thinking about, hey, I want something that's going to give me a little either color retention or leaf retention. Again, like I grow varieties called Chinzan. It's a little small one, only about 2 feet tall. But in addition to being the right height, and I do enjoy the flowers, one of the reasons I chose it is because it has a real dark glossy green with and it has that green color retention that's in there. But anyway, this is just kind of a little bit of a gimmicky thing to start you out talking about leaf color. Now, another thing that we get questions about quite often are with boxwood. Boxwood, particularly if they're an exposed area where it's cold and it's dry, they become the what we refer to as bronzing. The discoloration or fall color in them will start to pick up. A lot of times people will start bringing plants into their nursery thinking there's something wrong with them. Now the growers, because a lot of them, and there's boxwood enthusiasts, are aware of this, they select particular varieties for better winter coloration, ones that will retain a darker green color. So again, this is a picture from out in our landscape beds where each one of these rows is a different variety. Again, I took this picture a few years ago, so when you come into the clinic and people are concerned about their boxwoods turning orange and yellow and brown, that I'm able to show them. No, this is one of the ways that boxwoods react to cold temperatures. And since we, I don't know if we actually hit freezing. I was looking and I think my thermometer said like 34. There's a little bit of a light frost in the windshield this morning, but now we've actually had some chilly nights. We're beginning to see a little bit of this, and that color will intensify throughout the cold weather. But this is a normal occurrence. And like I said, you may see it vary in how pronounced it is based on kind of your microclimate, how sheltered the plants are or not. Doesn't mean there's anything really wrong with it. Again, I have a variety in my garden. It's called AZALEAS. It's a little small one, and it tends to get blotches of yellow through the winter. Nobody ever told me about any of this stuff. This is just you kind of learn it by having these plants in your garden, and you start observing and noticing, hey, this is just kind of a common characteristic of that. Now, this browning that we see, this is not normal bronzing or discoloration. This is an example of winter injury. You can see these are plants. These are skip laurels right over here on my left, probably your right. And then this is a holly that was planted late in the season. These were probably installed or planted around October time period, put in the ground, and then it's a lack of attention to watering through the winter time. So I see this is not fall coloration. This is really a result of drying out. When you have particularly evergreens, broadleaf evergreens, they are transpiring. They are, just like I always say, you and me, people, we perspire. We're losing moisture through our skin as we perspire. Plants are losing moisture through their leaves as they transpire. And if you're an evergreen, you're going to transpire all year round, right? Because that foliage is on you. So in this case, with a new plant that does not have a well-established root system, if it's not getting enough moisture, if that root ball accidentally dries out, then you're going to start to see that browning occur on the leaves. Now, these plants aren't dead. These leaves, they shed off this spring, new leaves grow, but we really want to try to avoid that. So this is my little reminder that if you are planting broadleaf evergreens, or if you have really even in this past year, if we go into the wintertime and we're getting rain, sleet, snow, and ample moisture, that usually is sufficient. But in the past, a lot of our winters, we will hit a dry spell where it might be 4 weeks. And there's been no rain, no sleet, no snow. Things are very dry, cold, and windy. In those circumstances, you might, in your water, I know it's shut off outside, you might have to fill up a watering can or a bucket and go out there and hand water these occasionally to prevent that from happening. But again, hopefully Mother Nature will provide and we don't get into that situation. But that's a little precaution. And since this is the plant clinic, I know I'd say I was talking about fall foliage, but I got to talk about, hey, these are foliage problems, and they are relevant here to this time of year. And it's also problems that I want to avoid or be on the lookout for. So this was an email that I received, I think about a week, maybe 10 days ago, from a customer who had planted recently or this spring had planted a sweet bay magnolia. This is our native magnolia. It is not evergreen. It's sometimes listed as semi-evergreen, which means it may hold on to, 10% of its foliage if it's a mild winter, but most of the time it does shed all of its leaves. But in this case, when they start to see on this side, this is actually a result of a fungal disease called mildew. A lot of you are familiar with that, powdery mildew, very common. Magnolias are a little bit susceptible to it. It's just a nuisance. It's too late and there's no point in doing anything about now, but I say, no, they're concerned about the health of their tree. I'm saying, hey, that's okay, this is mildew. Those leaves are going to shed off of there. Next year, we'll have a whole new set of leaves, no problems there. But on this side, what caught my eye, this is a deer rubbing. At this time of year in the fall, deer go into what we call their rutting season when they're out looking for mates. And what will happen is the males, of course, go and they like to rub their antlers up and down along small trees. And they're doing this both to mark their territory with their scent and also removing that felt off their antlers. This hits its peak activity really in November. So I was just a little surprised to see this already starting to occur in October and thought, well, this started a little conversation at our plant clinic and said, you know, I really want to get the word out there. If you have small trees, there may be that 1 inch to 2 inch diameter, particularly, those seem to be favorites for the deer to go rubbing on there. And I've noticed over the years, they seem to love cherry trees. Like it doesn't matter, like the Yoshino cherries, Kwanzan cherries, as well as your fruit trees. And they also seem to really love the sweet bay magnolia for some reason. Something about those, they just seem to really go for it. Of course, they'll rub maples and oaks and others, but those seem to be a couple of their favorites. So if you have those kind of trees out there, and if you are in deer country, this is just a little plastic spiral netting, and they come either 2 foot or 3 foot lengths. I think there's 3 or 4 of them in a bag like that, but they can just be wrapped, easily wrapped and secured around the tree trunk to protect that from any deer rubbing that might occur. So that, just want to kind of get that announcement out there. And then I've got one other little video that I'm going to show you that has to do with fall coloration and evergreens, because our phone is ringing off the hook with this. And then we will take a few questions.
Hi, I'm David Yost with Merrifield Garden Center. And did you realize that even evergreens shed their leaves? We expect to see this with many of our shade trees and flowering trees, but we're always surprised when we start to see the yellowing and shedding on pine trees. But this is a normal seasonal sequence. Each year, beginning around October and continuing into November, they will shed their older 3-year-old needles. They're on the interior of the plant, but they continue to hold on to their 1 and 2 year needles. So this plant, in fact, does remain evergreen throughout the year. And next spring, it will flush out with new growth and increase its density. This same pattern occurs with plants in the cypress family. So you can see in this Hinoki cypress, this interior yellowing and shedding, they will slough off of here. This crust of green will remain throughout the winter, and next spring will flush out with new growth to give it better density. So this is just a normal seasonal pattern. But if you ever have concerns about the health of your plant, please bring samples, bring pictures into us at the plant clinic, because we are here to help you if any questions you might have about your garden. Hi, I'm David Yost with Mary.
All right, everybody. So we're getting probably literally over the last couple of weeks, 5 or 10 people a day contacting our plant clinic, wondering what's wrong with their evergreens. For some reason, and I don't know why, there are years when this shedding is more pronounced than other years. This happens to be one of those years where it's very pronounced. But if you do see that going on, take a close look at it. Make sure it's just on the interior, but we're staying green out the tips. And it all started within the past couple of weeks. Then that's just going to be kind of the normal shedding. So those are all fall color topics, but yes, they are all associated with evergreens. But I'm going to take a little break right here, see if you have any questions, kind of like more specifically to evergreens. And if not, then we will from there move on to some trees with great color.
Thanks, David. Yeah, we actually have a question that's come in about a Hinoki cypress. So this person's Hinoki cypress, when they planted it, they found it was sitting in a lot of water. And so they pulled it out and noticed that it's losing a lot of needles. So would that be something you'd want to have a look at, or do you think it's likely that would still be that needle drop that's expected?
Yeah, it's kind of a little hard to answer that because when a plant's distressed, too much water, not enough sunlight, needs to be fertilized. I say a plant's way of saying I've got a headache is when leaves start to yellow and shed. So that is a warning sign. The only thing I could say is to look at the pattern. As I said, this normal seasonal shedding really started pretty noticeably about 2 weeks ago. So I'm looking at saying, okay, did this shedding start, a month ago, or did it just start within the last couple of weeks? Also, just stand back and look at the pattern. If it's just on the interior branchlets, and it started in the last couple of weeks, I'm pretty confident that's just going to be seasonal shedding. If you're seeing this go out even towards the tips of the branches, or if it's covering the entire plant or drooping, then that's something that I'm more concerned about. The fact that you already took the plant out, I couldn't remember if you said you relocated or raised it or reconditioned the soil. You've really done what you can to address the watering situation. But so yes, overwatering can absolutely lead to yellowing and shedding branchlets, but it could just be seasonal. And I think with that video I want to talk to you, you'll be able to figure out which one it is.
All right. Okay. Evergreens. Next question. Is now a good time? Okay. Is now a good time to trim azaleas? Roses, I know, are a different situation. Or evergreen shrubs?
Basically, no. There's always going to be some exceptions, but for example, azaleas, they already have their flower buds on them. So their flower buds were produced, back in August, September. If you go in and trim azaleas today, you would be removing their flower buds. So we generally hold off on that and do any pruning on those after they flower next spring.
And can you clarify too, because this person said they had bloomathon. So if they have the bloomathon or like the encores, they've already set their buds too.
Yes, exact same thing. It doesn't matter if there's the bloomathon, encore, or your traditional varieties, wait until after their spring flowering to do any pruning on them. Other evergreens, I'm going to say things like even boxwoods and the chamaecyparis, or the cypress and yews and all those kind of plants. I generally don't like to prune them too much at this time of year for a couple reasons. One is boxwoods are kind of notorious for this. If you did prune them, sometimes they react by regenerating new growth that then gets damaged during the cold winter. So right now I'm saying basically hands off. If you want to do just a little bit of tiny shaping, or you got crazy branches here or there, that kind of stuff, go ahead and prune it. But if you're trying to reduce their size, or if you want to shear them to shape them, I would much rather do that more towards like February or March.
Okay. Next question. Okay. Do you have any recommendations for native evergreens?
That's a real tough situation for me because we just don't have a whole lot of native evergreen shrubs. We do pretty good in the tree department. Hey, I love just our native cedar. The Virginia red cedar is fantastic. The different pines like white pine, even our native, the Virginia pine. So we're okay, in the tree department. Is interesting, Southern magnolia at one time was called native, and then they've done additional research, and now they say, no, it's not native. It was introduced to Virginia. But I'll still include that in there. Where we get stuck really is kind of more in the shrub department. We do have mountain laurels, rhododendrons, inkberry, but they can all be a little bit fussy in their own way. So from a plant clinic perspective, I see cultural issues mostly associated with having really good, well-drained soil to be successful with those, with rhododendrons and azaleas. Inkberries, they're being utilized a lot to fulfill that need, but they also tend to get what we call leggy at the bottom, and they're not quite as foolproof as we said, as we'd like them to be. I should put it that way.
Okay. 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 We have a question about pruning a Hinoki cypress, which may, if I understand, that's a bit of a big topic. Is there a way to trim back a Hinoki cypress that's outgrown its spot? That may be something I refer directly to you for later.
Well, no, let me just say this, because we are talking, I know it's fall color and we're talking about pruning and evergreens, but I opened this can of worms by talking about evergreens because I felt like doing something a little different. Needled evergreens, you know, conifers respond differently to pruning. So conifers, you know, where we talk about things like primarily, you know, candy cypress, their growth occurs out here in the tips on the branches. Just like we said, you see the shedding, you see their old growth shedding and their new growth out the tips. So I can't really do too much to reduce their size. If I cut back into this old growth, removing the green tips, it will not regenerate. It will not fill back in. Whereas a holly, for example, I can cut it back here and it fills in. So you can prune them, but it's usually just a little bit out the tips. If you need to dramatically reduce the size, probably not going to work for you.
Okay. All right. That looks like that's it for evergreens for now.
Okay. Good. Well, let's go back and talk about some trees, because now we get into really in some beautiful trees, and let's go from here. So again, when we talk about native trees, this is where, you know, because again, we live in a eastern hardwood forest, you know, and right here in Virginia, we got some of the most diverse collections of plants and beautiful plants, and fall is just a glorious season for us. And like I say, especially if we have the cold weather. Now, this is a personal favorite of mine. This is black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. It's just a really nice, clean looking tree. It doesn't really produce showy flowers. It doesn't produce messy fruit or anything. It's extremely durable and reliable. So it can grow in almost any conditions, but like this one that you see growing beside its detention pond really demonstrates one of the best uses, especially if you've got sort of heavy clay, poorly drained, wet situations. It does well in this environment. My previous home where I was living, and that's not like I recommend this, but there was a black gum that was there. It was buried by more than 24 inches of backfill soil during construction process, and the tree survived and lived. I mean, that just speaks to its durability and resilience that's in there. So it's one of the first to put on fall coloration. They are at full peak color right now today. If you're out driving in the mountains, you'll see these puffs of red that's out there. They're the first ones that show up. So it's it's actually, there's different varieties out there, some named cultivars, some of them where the new growth comes in a little bit of color. So again, we're looking to pick out varieties and selections that are really great for landscapes. It will get large. I mean, this will grow. I mean, it could be 90 feet tall, but that's over a period of like 90 years. So in a home landscape, it will eventually, it might outgrow its space, but even a tree like the one you see here, which is probably a good 40 feet tall, is probably also close to 40 years old. So they're kind of a slow grower or moderate growth rate. But that's the black gum, beautiful native tree, especially if it's an area that you might have less than ideal drainage. Now, this is another native tree, understory tree. This is a red bud. It flowers for us in early spring with kind of magenta pink blossoms on there, and then goes to a brilliant, nice yellow fall coloration. And right about that, it's a nice medium to small size tree. You know, maybe we're talking 20, 25 feet tall and wide. These are younger trees, probably, 10, 15 years old, and actually have some pretty nice maturity to it. Now, I'm hoping, I'm kind of staying on this image a little bit, you might notice something a little bit funky going on here. Well, this is my trick slide. Again, I do this just to keep myself entertained that's in there. This picture was taken in May, and I'm here talking about fall color. How does that work? Well, it doesn't really work. This is a variety that's called Hearts of Gold. The new leaves emerge a yellow color, so it does get the nice magenta flowers on it in April. The new leaves emerge out this kind of a really brilliant yellow color. As we move into summer, that color starts to fade more to a green, and then it goes back to its fall coloration. So that was my trick there. This picture is from April, but this picture is taken from October. So you can see that yellow is natural coloration, and we grow this tree primarily for the flowers, but I think sometimes we underappreciate also its fall coloration. So it's a little bit of a double take there. That flower picture is in May, and then this one is in October. All right, so that's a little plug for red buds. And let me say, there's so many varieties out there too. Some of them have purple leaves. There's one now that's everybody's got really enthralled with. It's called Flamethrower. In the spring, it emerges with orange and yellow and kind of lime colored chartreuse. It's just a bizarre looking tree. So lots is going on there with leaf coloration. If you're looking for a nice bright yellow in the landscape, I think it's probably hard to beat the ginkgo. Ginkgo biloba, obviously we are not anywhere close to native. We did have native, at least North America. We had ginkgos in North America, but that goes back, I think, last to about 120 million years ago. We haven't seen them since that time. But this is Ginkgo biloba. Really, it's from China. It's, I guess, depending on your time scales and stuff to go back. But it's a favorite. I think I haven't watched, but Blandy Farm, the State Arboretum, has a collection of ginkgo, and they keep a clock there going to tell when they reach their peak coloration. So you can always check their website to see if it's the right time to go there. They may have come out early. They might still be at their peak right now, or we might actually be just past that. You can always check their website to go. But this is, you can see this is one they took down at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. They've got some nice ones out. Meadowlark Botanical Gardens. You can add a beautiful one to your own landscape. This is a tree that's very sturdy, very tolerant of harsh urban conditions. Has, I'm going to say, zero pest problems. I've never heard of any kind of issues at all. Never encountered one. Never had anybody bring one into a clinic or at all. So it's a good, sturdy, and beautiful yellow, and it kind of has this habit of suddenly dropping all of its leaves at once. So as far as cleanup goes, that's easy. And you can see the close-up detail of the leaf. And sometimes they're different forms. This one's just totally rounded through there. Some of them have a little scalloped out center. So again, a real interesting tree, interesting history, biology, and really prized for its fall coloration. Jumping back to the native trees, this was just native woodland shot that a housing development gone into, and you can see this beautiful gold right now is a hickory. Hickory is, they're really kind of hit their peak, I think, just this past weekend. If you happen to be driving down the road, you'll see this sort of tall, upright, stately tree. Usually the trunk's just straight as an arrow, like you see in this picture. Just a beautiful, just what I call kind of this golden yellow, almost a burnt yellow kind of coloration that stands out that's in there. And it's such a resource for wildlife also, with the hickory nuts that support so many animals that's in there. Nicely contrasted, that's our native American holly that's in there. And of course, the dogwood in the foreground. I wanted to highlight that our native dogwood is just, it earns its place as a native, as our state tree, because, what else gives you is deep, bright red fall coloration, red berries for the birds as we go into wintertime, beautiful form, and then comes out with white flowers in the spring. So this is truly a tree for all seasons, and everybody buys them and thinks about them for their flowers, but do not underestimate the fall coloration in that. I'll say it also goes with our with the Kusa dogwood, the Asian species. It also gives you beautiful deep red fall coloration, and they're really starting to light up right now. Red maple, again, another native tree. This is actually, I think, is the dominant native species in our landscape. But I like this picture because These are all three the same tree. In the back, see, we're going from basically yellow to red to orange. This is just all genetic variation that occurs within the species. So it seems when I'm out walking around the forest, most of the red maples I see are actually yellow, like the one that you have in this background. So what we do as horticulturists, plant people, we start selecting varieties, or what we do is we find a clone. So a grower might go out and they say, well, I really like this red color one in the center. It's got good form and shape, and I love the fall color, whatever characteristics. And they'll develop it from cuttings. They'll take cuttings off of that so that the next one becomes an identical twin from the parent tree. So this is what we tend to do as far as landscaping goes. When you come in and you find varieties, like this is one that's called October Glory, a very old and very popular one. You can see the consistency of color that we get through there. So this way, when you're buying a named variety, you actually know what you're getting. One of the things that's happened, this is just kind of interesting how plants develop. You know, these are the trees that develop, I call it little helicopters, little brown seed pods come floating down in there in late spring. As kids, we all love playing around. But sometimes then people are bothered because in a parking lot environment or something like this, then you got to go sweep up and clean up all the little seed pods. So more recently, there are seedless varieties that have been developed. Try to remember names like Brandywine. Oh, there's another one that came out in National Arboretum that's escaping my, I should know it. Forget it. But anyway, when you come into the nursery, we'll have that and people can remember what all these names mean. But when you see names like October Glory or Brandywine and stuff, these are clones that will give you consistent coloration and also looking at other qualities. Sugar maple, we're at the southern tier for its adaptation, though it is a Virginia native tree. Sugar maples are the ones that are really at peak bloom right now. I was out this past weekend and just noticing, walking around the neighborhood, if you look off in the distance, you just see this flaming orange color and this nice, you know, rounded, dense, full kind of tree. This one literally from, 500 feet away, you can tell that's a sugar maple. I'm literally, I can pick them out and show you because they're at their full glory right now. And if that's the kind of color that you're after, to me, in terms of just fall coloration, it's hard to say anything bad about sugar maple. They go from kind of this orange, and you'll have greens and orange and yellows and all these colors kind of interspersed. Now, like I said, they're not the most heat and drought tolerant species. They're a little bit further north is where they're happiest. So again, when you see variety names, things like Green Mountain, these are ones that somebody has sort of cloned or selected predominantly for heat and drought tolerance. Chinese pistache, as you can see, that is a tree that is nowhere close to native. But I pulled it out of lineup because in terms of fall coloration, this is a showstopper. These were pictures I took down at Meadowlark Gardens. It's in full color right now. Again, and when this thing, the color, the picture just doesn't do it justice. I mean, this thing just lights up. It glows. Again, because here you can be off in the distance and you just see this tree literally like glowing that's out there. So this is one, it's not real well known. It's not super popular, but that's just because we don't know it. When you see it, and when you see it in the fall coloration, then it becomes more of a must-have. When they're young like this, they can have a little bit of that gawky shape to them, but as it grows and matures and starts to fill out, it does develop a very nice form on there as well. So that's Chinese pistache. I think we've got just a limited number of them in supply, but it's one that you might want to look at. Very tolerant of urban conditions. We just planted a couple of them out in the parking lot. We were replacing trees, parking lot trees, where it's literally surrounded on all sides, 360 by asphalt in the restricted root zone. So it's a harsh environment. We thought that would be a nice place to showcase this tree. And so a couple of them were planted this past spring, and we'll see how that goes. All right, I am going to take a break, talk if we have any tree questions. And then if there's time, I still have a few shrubs that we can talk about.
Yeah, we've got a few questions. First question is about ginkgos. Are there male and female ginkgos, and is one better than the other?
Yes, there are separate male and female. The female of course, has this fruit that's about the size of a walnut or something. And when it starts to rot, it's fleshy and has a nut inside of it. But when it's fleshy, it just stinks to high heaven. So the female is not used in landscaping. Apparently, I've never eaten ginkgo nuts, but they're tasty, and there's a whole lot of lore that goes around. But the females, we pretty much avoid them for any kind of landscape use because of the messy fruit.
All right, next question. Can you suggest some options for a small tree for sun? Like, would a variegated Coosa dogwood work?
Yes, Coosa dogwoods are very tolerant of hot, sunny conditions. They're pest resistant. They're sturdy. I don't know if the variegated one, how the fall coloration measures up on that. I've never thought about it, never paid attention to. So that would be kind of a good thing to look at right now and see if they get the same bright red coloration that the other Coosas get. But yeah, that is a really durable tree. I happen to have one in my front yard. It was there when I bought the house. So I've been observing it for like 15 years. And it's, again, flowers. Some people complain that the fruit's messy. I don't have any trouble with that. The squirrels come and eat every one of them up. Birds even try to eat on them. But like I said, flowers, fall color, interesting fruit, nice form, peeling, exfoliating bark as they mature. All good things to say about that.
Okay. All right, next question. I have a location that is in the shade of my house most of the day. What tree or shrub could I use that won't get very tall? I was thinking perhaps of a small lace leaf maple.
That's a very good choice. The Japanese maples, they'll, like a lot of plants, they'll grow in full sun, they'll grow in full shade. Where they do their best is somewhere in that middle ground. If they're in full all day sun, they get stressed in the hot conditions. You start to get leaf scorch out in the tips. Some of them, even the whole leaf starts scorched. So if you put them in a bright filtered light, that's where I think the best place is. If it goes into heavy shade, it will live, but the growth is going to be more spindly, more open. It won't have the density that's in there. It might even compromise some of the intensity of color if it's a red leaf variety, or even its fall coloration, but still would be a nice choice. If we get to our shrubs, I've got a plant here also that you might, totally different direction, different look, but it's called Fothergilla. That's in my shrub pictures. There's some small ones there that are quite shade tolerant, give you a nice fall color, spring coloration, but it's a multi-stem shrub. You'll see it's a very different kind of form.
Okay. All right. Good info. All right. This is a very sweet note. Thank you, Suzanne. Okay. So Suzanne used to watch you and Debbie on the TV show. So she wrote a really nice note in here. I'm going to skip past it just because of time constraints, but okay. She's had to remove a crabapple tree and some shrubs from her yard. So she has a blank slate. She'd like to replace it with some natives that are good for the birds and the pollinators, etc. It's a mostly sunny location and she needs a small to medium tree. She's thinking there might be an oak. Are there any like small to medium oaks that she could plant, or would you have another suggestion?
No, so my first suggestion, and this is gives me an opportunity to plug an organization that's called Plant Nova Natives.
Yes.
It's a consortium of many different groups. And if you just go to Plant Nova Natives, plant as in Plant Northern Virginia Natives, .com, I'm pretty sure, or it's a .org, but their website is fantastic resource on locally native plant species and their landscape attributes and where you can use them and not use them and which ones are attractive to wildlife as such. I often refer to that. One of the things I'll say though is like a lot of our native species, like oaks, and I'd mentioned hickories and stuff, they are big trees and just don't lend themselves to small landscapes. And then Sally, did she say full sun or?
She said mostly sunny.
Yeah, mostly sunny. I'd have to give that some thought of what would be a good tree in those locations, because things like dogwoods, redbuds, and everything tend to be a little bit of an understory tree. They're somewhat tolerant of, they'll take a certain amount of sun, but just not full, hot, all day sun. And I'm sure there's many others. They're just not coming to mind right now. But go to Plant Nova Natives, and then with that information in mind, come check with us, and then we can help with you in terms of availability, what's out there, what's available. That's some of the different cultivars, that might fit your particular needs.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I love Plant Nova Natives. We did have a question really quick before I forget. That yellow wrinkly gourd that's to your right.
This guy?
You know what that is called?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? I love that. When I had to, that kind of caught my eye. Just, I don't know. We have these bins of gourds, and there might be
massive bins of gourds at the store.
Yeah, exactly. Might be 100 gourds in there. This is the only one I saw like that in there. It just rose to the surface, and I grabbed it. But they're all so distinctive. I just brought a few of them in here.
Yeah, we have some really cool ones. Okay, let's see here. She says, thank you, great resource. Yeah, for anybody, Plant Nova Natives, we all love, and they actually come to our store and work with us on like tagging plants and stuff. We love Plant Nova Natives. All right, can camellias, mountain laurel, or rhododendron grow under the shade of a redbud or a crepe myrtle? I think I understand this. I may be misunderstanding this question, but I think that's it. So
I'm going to say yes, if they're sort of like planted more towards the drip line, more towards the fringe where they get some sunlight. There's one of the things I deal with a lot is when you're planting directly under trees, planting under a crepe myrtle, or this could be a dogwood or almost anything. The root system on trees gets pretty aggressive, and you get this competition for water and nutrients and root competition. And I'm finding now, as I'm growing that kind of environment with older landscape, you end up with sometimes what I call very much dry shade conditions. So you have to compensate a little bit in terms of soil preparation and doing a little bit of additional watering, and to get good flowering out of these plants. See, they all live in total complete shade, but if you want to get good flowering on, they do need some bright indirect light, which is what I'm saying. If we can push them a little bit further out, if you put them right directly under the full canopy of the tree, between the root competition and the shade, they're going to live, but you're going to be disappointed in the amount of flowering they produce.
Okay. All right, we have a couple questions that have come in there not related to trees.
Let me do it, Sal, because I really have like 2 or 3 shrubs.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's get to the last few. Let
me do these, and I'll try to be a little quicker and then see how we go. But a couple shrubs that I don't think I could live without is oak leaf hydrangea. Again, this is a southeastern U.S. native, not necessarily a Virginia native, but a southeastern U.S. native. And again, one of these plants that I say just a must-have. You get this nice, coarse oak leaf looking kind of textured foliage on there, flowers typically in May, and do not ever overlook or underestimate the fall coloration that goes with these. I was out walking the other day and looking at these in a common area. They're just this, beautiful raspberry red right now, already this time of year. Again, that's a shrub, and there's little dwarf varieties, that stay, under 4 feet tall, and there's big ones that will grow, 8 feet tall. Fothergilla, this is one I'd mentioned as a candidate, maybe for a shade garden. This is in the hazel family, and hazel trees, anything in the witch hazel family is a great performer. This one that I had to put the flowers, very early spring bloomer in April. It gets these interesting bottle brush, and I will mention fragrant blooms in April. This was a picture taken about 2 days ago. This particular variety is one called Suzanne. It's the smallest of them that I know of. It's I've only had it in my garden for about 3 years. It's supposed to stay under about 3 feet tall, maybe 2 foot wide. So far, it is living up to all of that. And you can see also for beautiful fall colors. So this is one that will tolerate slightly moist soils, doesn't have to have the best of drainage. This can't see it, but it's right behind the downspout. I'm trying to remember if it's native. I know it's a southeastern native. I'm not positive if that's a Virginia native, but Fothergill, and there's many varieties out there. Some of them have even more spectacular fall color, but the plants grow a little bit bigger. This is witch hazel. Now this is not the native witch hazel. This is a hybrid, one that's called Arnold's Promise. And so you can see the leaves, literally, some of them will start out in this multicolor with a little bit of yellow at the tips, red, green. And then as it progresses, it will oftentimes go into this kind of solid yellow coloration that's in there. And right behind it, this plant that's that bright lemon yellow is a perennial, Amsonia hubrecti. So that is one that, again, it's beautiful year-round, nice fern-like foliage, but to me, it's the fall colorations there. So my big plug here is just don't forget fall color. Think about that when you design, when you choose your plants. To me, it's the prettiest time of the year, and I am out of time. I'm going to stop there. And Sally's the boss of this program, so I'll let her decide if we have allowed to take any calls or not.
We have one more question. So I will say, and I've been emailing people whose questions we weren't able to get to, but please feel free to email me if I didn't send you my email address. You can hit reply on your Zoom confirmation email to hit reply. If you're on Facebook and you're watching this, then you can email me at sburrows@mgcemail.com. Go to our website too. There's a contact us button that goes to a colleague of mine. So we're happy to answer your questions. David, we have one more question that I will just ask really because it's a fast one. Does Fothergill, does that need a lot of sun?
No, it does not. Now, it will grow in full sun, but it's best adapted to part shade. That's its natural environment, is a part shade.
Okay. And that was the last one. So we'll go ahead because I know we're over time. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. David, thank you so much. Just so everybody knows, we have a couple more virtual plant clinics for the year, and then we'll take a break for the holidays. So we've got those just went up on the website, but we'll release topics for those later. We are working on getting some holiday classes together. So those will be coming out soon as well. And of course, we still have a few more classes left in our fall series. So I think that about covers all the kind of announcements. David, anything you want to wrap up with?
Just realize I have to say, hey, this don't think that the gardening season's over. This just began a new season. It is perfect conditions to go out and plant. So don't let that, no hesitations on that. So if you saw anything that interests you, come in, look at, learn about the varieties. We can talk to you in more detail, and, don't let this season slip by without putting something new in your garden.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Everybody, as always, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great afternoon.